They called it the Horizon Academy, though no horizon could truly be seen from its halls. The station hung in the velvet dark between stars, a vast ring of silver and obsidian rotating slowly above a pale blue gas giant. From a distance, it looked serene, almost delicate. Up close, it was a monument to power, ambition, and arrogance. The greatest interstellar species of the known galaxy had poured their wealth and pride into this place, declaring it neutral ground, a crucible where the future leaders of the galaxy would be forged. To be admitted was to be acknowledged as important. To fail here was to be forgotten. The corridors of Horizon Academy were wide enough for creatures with wingspans wider than cargo skiffs. Gravity shifted subtly from wing to accommodate different physiologies. The air itself was a carefully engineered blend, adjusted every few meters by invisible emitters so that oxygen breathers, methane inhalers, and silicon-respiring beings could coexist without incident. And yet, despite all that effort toward harmony, the Academy had a hierarchy. Everyone knew it. At the top were the Kethari. They were tall, powerfully built, and unmistakably predatory. Digitigrade legs ended in talons polished to ceremonial sharpness. Their bodies were wrapped in sleek fur that shifted color subtly with mood, though most Kethari kept it deliberately muted, a sign of discipline. Their faces were feline, but not in the small, soft way humans use the word cat. These were the faces of apex hunters, forward-facing eyes, slit pupils, and muzzles filled with teeth meant to end struggles quickly. The Kethari had once ruled half a spiral arm through conquest and guided protection. Even now, centuries after their empire had supposedly mellowed into diplomacy, no one truly forgot what they were capable of, especially not the students. So when Varesh of Claw 7, heir to one of the oldest Kethari war lines, entered the Academy's central training hall, the room adjusted itself in ways no machine had been programmed to do. Conversation softened, spines flattened, wings tucked closer to bodies. Varesh liked that. He moved with the lazy confidence of a predator who had never gone hungry, his long tail swaying behind him in a slow, deliberate arc. The faint gleam of his ceremonial collar marked him as nobility, though he wore it loosely, as if to say he did not need symbols to command respect. He had come to observe the new intake. That alone was unusual. Kethari of Varesh's standing rarely bothered with first-year students, but rumors had been circulating through the Academy for weeks now, rumors of a new species admitted under special provisional status, a species from a backwater system, a species with no psychic presence worth noting, no natural weapons, no claws, no venom, no exoskeletal armor. A species whose greatest claim to fame was surviving its own planet. Varesh's lip curled slightly as his eyes scanned the assembled students. Humans, he thought. There were only a handful of them, 6 to be precise. They stood together near the edge of the hall, close to a gravity stabilizer just a bit heavier than galactic standard. Their bodies looked wrong, too soft, too exposed. No fur, no scales, no carapace. They wore simple Academy uniforms modified to fit their awkward frames. And one of them, one small female, stood half a step forward from the others. She was shorter than most species in the hall, dark hair pulled back in a rough tie. Her posture was relaxed but not sloppy, as if she were conserving energy rather than displaying confidence. Her eyes moved constantly, not darting in fear, but cataloging. Varesh stopped walking. He stared at her. Something about that one irritated him. Perhaps it was the way she did not lower her gaze when his shadow fell across her, or the way her heart rate, plainly visible on the ambient bioreaders, remained steady. He stepped closer. The hall seemed to hold its breath. This was not an official sparring session. This was not a sanctioned dominance display.
This was a Kethari noble approaching a human female who weighed less than one of his legs. Varesh leaned down, his massive head lowering until his muzzle was level with hers. Up close, the difference was absurd. His breath alone stirred loose strands of her hair. His eyes glowed faintly gold, pupils narrowing as instinct pressed against centuries of learned restraint. He expected fear. What he got was curiosity. She tilted her head slightly, studying him the way a biologist might study a dangerous animal from behind reinforced glass. That was when Varesh made his mistake. He growled. It was not loud. It didn't need to be. The sound carried subharmonics that vibrated in bone, a primal warning encoded in dozens of prey species across the galaxy. Several students flinched outright. One of the avian delegates folded his wings instinctively. The growl said one thing, clearly and unmistakably: know your place. The human girl did not step back. For a fraction of a second, she said nothing. Then she drew in a breath and growled back. It was raw, unpolished, lacking the resonant power of a Kethari throat, but it carried something else instead, something sharp, something ancient, a sound torn from deep in the chest, backed not by dominance rituals, but by defiance. It was the sound of a creature that refused to be prey. The effect was immediate. The hall went silent. No hum of machinery, no rustle of movement. Even the ventilation seemed to pause, as if the station itself were listening. Varesh froze. His ears flattened in shock before he could stop them. His tail lashed once, hard, striking the floor with a crack that echoed far too loudly in the stillness. The human girl held his gaze. Her jaw was set, her eyes were steady, her hands were clenched, not in fear, but in readiness. Around them, every student present understood the same thing at the same time. Something had just gone very wrong. And somewhere deep in Varesh's instincts, beneath training, beneath pride, beneath centuries of Kethari supremacy, a single unwelcome thought took root. That was not a prey response.
For 3 heartbeats, no one moved. The silence in the training hall had substance now, thick and pressing, as if gravity itself had increased. Varesh remained bent forward, his massive frame locked in place, every instinct screaming that something fundamental had been challenged. Across from him, the human girl stood her ground. Her name, though few yet knew it, was Mara Ellison. She did not know the Kethari words for dominance displays. She did not know the precise cultural significance of a noble's growl within Horizon Academy's informal power structure. What she knew, what she felt, was simpler and far older. A large predator had attempted to intimidate her, and on Earth, that lesson was learned early. You didn't always win by being stronger. You didn't always win by being bigger. Sometimes you won by refusing to yield. Varesh straightened slowly, drawing himself up to his full height. Around them, instructors began to stir, their attention snapping sharply to the confrontation. The Academy's oversight systems lit with quiet alerts, calculating probabilities, risk assessments, and diplomatic consequences in the background. But no alarm sounded. Not yet. Varesh's fur rippled, color shifting almost imperceptibly toward a darker hue. His claws flexed, scraping lightly against the polished floor. He was acutely aware of every eye in the hall, aware that this moment, trivial as it might seem, had become a test. Kethari dominance relied on perception as much as force, and perception was slipping. "You," Varesh said at last, his voice controlled but edged with something dangerous, "will explain yourself." The words were spoken in trade standard, automatically translated by the Academy's systems. His tone carried authority, an assumption that obedience would follow as naturally as gravity.
Mara blinked once. Then she shrugged. "Didn't seem fair," she said. Her voice was calm, unraised, carrying just enough to be heard. "You growl, I growl. Seemed polite." A ripple moved through the gathered students. Polite. The word landed like a dropped blade. Several species reacted visibly. The slender illithri, whose kind communicated almost entirely through tonal harmonics, recoiled in disbelief. A pair of dragoon, reptilian scholars with thick cranial plates, exchanged slow, incredulous blinks. Varesh's tail lashed again. "You mock me," he said. "No, I match you." She shifted her stance slightly, feet planting more firmly. It was a small motion, but a practiced one. Subtle adjustments drilled into muscle memory. More than one combat-trained observer noticed. Varesh noticed too. His eyes narrowed. "You are aware," he said slowly, "that I could end this interaction in less than a second." Mara nodded. "Yeah," she said. "Back home, we call that being bigger. Doesn't always mean you're right." A murmur spread now, no longer fully suppressed. Instructors began moving closer, careful not to escalate, but unwilling to ignore what was unfolding. This was no longer a private dominance check. It was a spectacle. Varesh took a step forward. Immediately, one of the Academy's senior wardens, a towering six-limbed Karathi, whose species specialized in conflict mediation, interposed itself smoothly between them. "That is enough," the warden said, voice resonant and calm. "This is not an authorized challenge." Varesh's gaze flicked to the warden, irritation flashing hot and brief. He inclined his head a fraction, acknowledging the authority, but his attention snapped back to Mara just as quickly. "Human, you will give your name." Mara hesitated only a moment. "Mara Ellison, first year, provisional intake." The words provisional intake hung heavy in the air. Everyone knew what that meant. Humans were here on trial. Their species had been admitted to Horizon Academy not because they were respected, but because they were interesting. Survivors of a death world with volatile climates, aggressive megafauna, and a long, bloody history of self-inflicted conflict. They were an experiment. Varesh's lip curled. "Remember this moment, Mara Ellison. Remember how boldly you stand when you are shielded by rules and watchers."
The next incident was not an accident. Varesh ensured that. The Horizon Academy prided itself on neutrality, but neutrality did not mean safety. Training simulations failed, environmental calibration slipped, mixed species exercises were notorious for misunderstandings, and when tensions rose quietly enough, they were often permitted to resolve themselves, so long as no one died and no official rules were broken. 3 days after the growl, a combat practical assessment was announced. Mandatory, mixed species teams, live environment simulation. Mara read the briefing twice, then a third time. Urban collapse scenario, she muttered. Multiple hostile contacts, limited resources. Her teammate, Jonah Reyes, leaned over her shoulder. That's a Kethari favorite. Figures, Mara said. The simulation chamber was one of the Academy's most advanced, an entire artificial city block, modular and adaptive. Buildings could collapse, atmosphere could change, gravity could fluctuate. Pain suppressors were installed, but they were imperfect by design. Pain, the Academy believed, was an excellent teacher. Teams assembled at opposite ends of the chamber. Varesh stood with his group, 3 Kethari, a Dragoon heavy, and an Illithri tactician. A formidable lineup, balanced and aggressive. Mara's team looked uneven. 2 humans, 1 avian scout species called a Kethari, and a small, 4-armed amphibious being whose name Mara still struggled to pronounce. Varesh watched them from across the chamber, eyes unreadable. When the start signal sounded, chaos bloomed. Holographic hostiles flooded the streets, simulated but dangerous enough to break bones and rupture organs if mishandled. The Kethari took to the air immediately, wings snapping open as it launched upward to scout. Varesh's team advanced in textbook formation, clean, efficient, dominant. Mara's team did not. They vanished. Varesh frowned as the minutes ticked by. His sensors showed movement. Human heat signatures slipping through alleys, ducking through collapsed structures, climbing where gravity should have made it difficult. They're avoiding engagement, the Illithri observed. Cowardice, the Dragoon grumbled. Varesh said nothing. Then the traps began to trigger. A building facade collapsed at precisely the wrong moment, separating Varesh from one of his teammates. A sudden gravity spike pinned another long enough for simulated hostiles to swarm. Still survivable, still manageable. Then the lights went out. Not completely, just enough. Smoke flooded the streets, thick and choking. Sound dampeners activated unpredictably, turning the city into a maze of echoes and false directions. Varesh's ears flattened. This was not random. This is irregular, Varesh said into the team channel. Before anyone could respond, something struck him from above. Not hard enough to injure, but hard enough to stagger. Varesh spun, claws out. Nothing. Then a voice, close, calm, human. Left side, Mara said. The Dragoon roared and turned. Too late. The Kethari dropped from above, striking the sensory node at the base of its skull with surgical precision. The Dragoon collapsed, stunned. Varesh lunged toward the sound, and the ground gave way beneath him. He fell 2 stories into a service corridor, hitting hard. Pain flared despite the suppressors. He rolled to his feet instantly, heart pounding, every sense screaming. He was alone. Above him, footsteps retreated, not running, withdrawing. Varesh snarled. He climbed. By the time he emerged back into the street, the simulation clock was nearly spent. His team was scattered, delayed, pinned, or isolated. Mara's team stood together at the extraction point, intact. When the simulation ended, silence fell again, heavier this time. Instructors exchanged glances, data scrolled rapidly across their displays. Outcome? The lead evaluator announced, voice carefully neutral. Team Ellison, mission success. Minimal casualties, effective objective control. Varesh stared across the chamber. Mara met his gaze. She did not smile. Later, in the quiet of the recovery corridor, Varesh found her alone. You orchestrated that, he said. Mara leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Yep. You exploited the environment, the rules, the expectations. Also, yep. That was not honorable combat. Mara considered him for a moment. Neither is being hunted, she said. We learned that early. Varesh studied her, really studied her this time. The lack of natural weapons, the soft skin, the eyes that never quite stopped moving. You are dangerous, he said. Mara shrugged. So are you. Difference is, you were taught to win fights. She pushed off the wall and walked past him. We were taught to survive them. Varesh remained where he was, the words echoing in his mind. For the first time, he understood. Humans did not need claws. They had teeth of a different kind. And the academy was only just beginning to feel their bite.
The incident that changed everything did not happen in a classroom. It did not happen in a simulation chamber or under the watchful eyes of instructors and evaluators. There were no carefully calibrated safety systems, no observers ready to intervene. It happened in the old maintenance ring. The Horizon Academy had been expanded many times over its long existence, and not all of its corridors were equally well traveled. The outer maintenance ring was a relic, functional, pressurized, but largely ignored. Students rarely passed through it unless they had reason. Mara had reason. The amphibian student from her simulation team, Keltis, had failed to report to evening cycle. That alone wasn't unusual. Many species kept strange hours. But Keltis had left behind a message on the shared human-compatible network. Something's wrong. Meet me if you can. So Mara went. The maintenance ring was dimly lit, its walls marked with old scarring from micrometeorite impacts long since patched. The air was cooler here, heavier. Her footsteps echoed softly as she followed the locator signal deeper into the ring. She found Keltis cornered near an auxiliary hatch. 3 figures stood between him and the corridor. Kethari. Not Varesh, but young, powerful, and unmistakably emboldened by the absence of witnesses. Their fur patterns marked them as mid-tier warline scions, old enough to know better, young enough to believe consequences were optional. This area is restricted, one of them said lazily, blocking Mara's path. She stopped. Move, she said. The Kethari glanced at one another, amused. The amphibian insulted one of us. We are resolving it. Keltis's 4 hands trembled, pressed flat against the wall. His species was not built for confrontation. His skin had already darkened in stress patterns. Mara felt something cold settle in her chest. You're 3, she said quietly. He's 1. That is not your concern, the first Kethari replied. Mara took another step forward. It happened fast after that. A shove. Keltis cried out. One of the Kethari laughed. Mara did not shout. She did not threaten. She inhaled and growled. Not the raw sound from before. This one was deeper, controlled. It carried a promise. The nearest Kethari barely had time to react before Mara moved. She went low, driving her shoulder into the soft joint behind his knee. He went down with a surprised snarl. She rolled with him, using his own momentum, slamming his head against the bulkhead. Not hard enough to kill, but hard enough to disorient. The second lunged. She didn't meet him head-on. She stepped inside his reach, grabbed his wrist, and twisted. There was a sharp crack as ligaments strained. He howled and fell back. The third froze. Not because Mara was stronger, but because she was relentless. She stood between them and Keltis, breathing hard, eyes locked, posture screaming one thing clearly and unmistakably. I will not stop. Security arrived seconds later, summoned by automated distress alerts and Keltis's panicked signal. The Kethari were restrained. Keltis was escorted to medical care. Mara sat on the floor, shaking now that the adrenaline ebbed. When Varesh arrived, summoned not as a student, but as a representative of his people, he took in the scene in silence. The human's growl echoed again in his memory, but now he understood what it meant. The disciplinary council convened within the cycle. The 3 Kethari were stripped of rank and expelled. Officially, it was for violating academy conduct. Unofficially, it was for misjudging a species that did not tolerate cruelty quietly. Mara was questioned. "Why did you intervene?" an instructor asked. She answered simply, "Because someone needed help." Varesh watched from the observation tier. He saw no pride in her posture, no triumph, only exhaustion and certainty. Afterwards, he approached her alone in the arboretum ring, where artificial sunlight filtered through vast transparent panels and alien plants swayed gently. "You could have been killed," he said. Mara shrugged. "So could Keltis. That is not how the galaxy calculates risk." Mara met his gaze. "Then the galaxy's math is wrong." Varesh was silent for a long moment. "You growled at me," he said at last. "Why?" Mara thought about it. "Because where I'm from, growling back is how you tell the world you won't be pushed. It doesn't mean you want to fight. It means you're still standing." Varesh inclined his head, a gesture of respect. In the cycles that followed, things changed, not loudly, not dramatically, but noticeably. Humans were no longer underestimated in quiet corners. Their methods were studied, their psychology debated, their presence accounted for. They were invited into planning sessions, not because they were strongest, but because they saw angles others missed. And Varesh found himself listening, learning, understanding. The galaxy had always respected strength, but now it was beginning to understand something else: resilience, adaptability, compassion sharpened by defiance. Humans did not conquer by claw or fang. They endured, they protected, they refused to yield. And for the first time, the galaxy understood what it truly meant to be human. If this story moved you, subscribe for more human stories from the stars.